Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to PBSE. This is episode 273. My addict partner keeps saying sorry, and he's trying, but he's not meeting my real needs.
When I like, Mark, how you put quotes around sorry and he's trying.
Yes, quotes around that, because that's, how many times do we say that?
Yes. Well, and as you're going to see, Mark's going to read this, but there are reasons for those quotes, because sorry and trying are very, very relative terms, particularly in the world of recovery, as many of you know.
They are, and it doesn't mean that they can't be sincere.
No.
But even when sincere, they can still be inadequate.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
There's two realities coexisting again that we talk about all the time.
So we're going to jump into this thing.
So let me read what this betrayed partner sent in to us. I've been listening to PBSE podcasts for 3 months. During that time, my partner and I have had 2 discovery days. After this last one, I told him that I need honesty, that without it, I can't give him grace. And we'll talk more about that phrase. I like that phrase she uses. He has been in therapy for 2 months, and he's now seeing a CSAT for the last 3 weeks. I can already tell small differences, but when we're talking about how I'm feeling, I find that he's always thinking about how my feelings are making me feel instead of how I'm feeling about the situation. And we'll talk about that. Sounds like a subtle difference, but it's not. I'm seeing a betrayal trauma specialist myself, and she reminds me that he's early on in recovery and that he doesn't have the capacity to hold space for my feelings. It has been very insightful to hear these perspectives that you both offer, and has helped me understand how my partner's mind could possibly be working. This being said, my question is, what are your guys' thoughts for asking for needs realistically as the betrayed partner? I'm struggling with wondering if I'm setting myself up to be hurt, or if it's okay to just keep repeating myself. He keeps saying sorry and that he's trying to be better, but I'm worried that he really doesn't see the true issue here. And that by repeatedly telling him the same things over and over again about what isn't working, that this is going to do us both more harm than good. I guess I'm just feeling stuck myself and scared.
It's a great submission. It really
That is.
And we can really connect with a lot of that. And like Mark said, there's a lot of moving pieces to this. So our hearts really go out to any partner who finds himself kind of in this situation. It's so difficult. You know, one of the hardest pieces, I think, for partners in this process, we may have said this in a recent podcast. I know we're covering it at length right now in D2C as we're getting into wants, needs, and boundaries in our addict partner and spouse couple program. But it comes off in different ways and in different phrases. But one of the biggest frustrations for partners is not feeling seen.
Not feeling seen. Yeah.
Right? You don't and you all hopefully know what we mean when we say that. Of course, they see you physically, but they're not really seeing you. For who you are, for what you truly represent, for what your needs truly are, and in many cases, how things are playing out and the impact that it's having on you, on the relationship, on themselves. One of the most devastating pieces of being in active addiction and in early recovery, like this couple is describing, is there is a real, very real lack of awareness about the world around us and what is happening. And so definitely a real challenge.
Well, and as we talk about the various dynamics that are going on in this relationship, a number of things jumped out at us, right? It's been 3 months. That sounds like there's been this real effort at being accountable, owning stuff, getting stuff out into the open, and 2 discovery days in 90 days. And those who might be new to PBC, Discovery Day means when the truth finally comes out about the betrayal, about what's been happening, what's been going on. Often it's because the addict gets found out, right?
Yes.
It's discovered through, as partners will call it, detective work. I found something on his phone, his computer. I discovered social media, conversations. There's been two of these. One Discovery Day is hard enough for a betrayed partner. This is two in 90 days.
And we don't even know fully what that means, whether
we
that's
don't
like a
even know
trickle disclosure of more information that wasn't disclosed previously,
Yeah, we don't know.
or if that means it's like a whole other, relapse that happened and now we've got to go through that again. But given that fact, and then you take into effect some of these other accounts, he is now seeing a CSAT, which is good, but that's only been going on for a few weeks. So up to a couple of weeks ago, things in this relationship were extremely hellish for this partner.
Yeah.
Still probably are to a degree, but that may be improving somewhat. But definitely during that time, just lots of uncertainty, fear, lack of where are we going, what's going on.
Well, and she described something that some would kind of find a nuance that might be hard to discern, but she says he's starting to take the initial steps of leaning into her feelings, but she feels he's not seeing and or he's sidestepping, this is how we're interpreting it, the real issues and the depth of the situation and the betrayal. I kind of get the impression that because she says he's leaning into my feelings, but just how my feelings are affecting me. Like, how are you feeling, sweetheart, partner? And what's that like for you? And what does it mean for you? And what I hear her saying is, does he realize the devastation he has caused? Does he realize the reality of this betrayal and what it means? It's almost like he's kind of following his therapist's instructions to help me process my feelings. But what about the deep depth of this whole thing? I get the impression that she feels like he's not really there yet.
Well, and I don't say this in an enabling or making it okay way, but 3 weeks in with meeting with the CSAT, I can almost guarantee he's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends on every situation's different, right? But depending on how his addiction has looked up to this point and how galvanized he's become, how deep the thinking errors run that, undermine all of it. I mean, all the factors we talk about on this program all the time. I mean, 3 weeks, I'm speaking for myself, 3 weeks into recovery, I can honestly say that once I got serious about this, I was absolutely trying to understand and I was making an effort, but my capacity was, if it needed to be at a 50, it was probably at a 7.
Well, and she says something that could be misunderstood. She has a betrayal trauma specialist that she is working with, this betrayed partner. She says, her therapist has told her that early in his addiction recovery, it's so early that he doesn't have the capacity to hold space for your feelings. And that could be misunderstood as like an excuse or, giving him a get out of jail free card. He doesn't have the capacity. So what does that mean? The capacity, right? You could include in that word the skill set. You could include in there, even getting in touch with what it even means to sit with someone in their feelings, to hold space for them, to lean into the pain. I know in my early, not just 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. What does it mean to literally sit with someone you have betrayed and literally know what it means to lean in and be with them in their pain without making it all about you, without going into shame, without going into denial or anger or defensiveness? What does it mean to hold space, especially for a betrayed partner's feelings? I don't doubt that his capacity is extremely limited at this point.
Well, and as we say often, right, elements of connection always begin at the top and they trickle from the top down. And every addict, why we're saying this and why this truly is a handicap for most of the addicts that we work with is, what is addiction? Among whatever else it is, it's an escape from authenticity. It's an escape from real feelings, real stressors, real problems, real awareness, real whatever. It's a connection with the unreal and a leaving of the real.
And he's been spending years or possibly decades practicing and being entrenched in what Steve just described, which is
Correct.
the opposite of what this betrayed partner needs right now.
And so a connection really does bleed from the top down. He's just barely scratching the surface on connecting with what the hell's going on in his brain.
Yeah.
And therefore, again, it's not an excuse. It's simply reality. His capacity to be able to do that with anybody else, because again, that top-down nature of connection, greatly handicapped right now.
Yes, very much
Now,
so.
that doesn't absolve him from taking the steps to be actively stretching that every single day, on the daily, on the regular, and sharing what he's doing. Okay, we want to be clear about that. But yeah, I would never expect the emotional zen that ought to be present with a man who's only 3 weeks into the process, tragically, right?
Well, and having said all that, you can hear how desperate she is, because what is the strategy that she's using, which is a crazy common, legitimate, very understandable strategy, right? When you've been betrayed, your partner is early in recovery or not where he needs to be. So what do you do as a betrayed partner? She says, I keep repeating myself to him about what is not working. And I have in parentheses here, how her needs are not being met. She just keeps repeating it and repeating it. And she says in her submission, I think by doing that, I might be doing us more harm than good. I just feel stuck and scared. Right? She's doing all she knows. Well, okay, I'm going to keep telling him this and saying this. And he's not responding the way I need him to. Right?
Yeah.
What do I do?
Well, and and this isn't in our notes, but I want to be careful in what I say, because this is just a submission, right? We don't know a lot of the details here, but the phrase that comes to mind is one that I borrow from Brene Brown, noted author on shame and connection, and she talks often about, people need to earn the right to hear your story.
Yes.
And that runs to different depths, right? Now, obviously, these two people are in a committed partnership, and so it's not so much about the right. In many ways, she has probably shared much of her full self with him. But where we do see partners, one of the common pitfalls in this process is when a partner will burn out their emotional energy or pour all of their emotional energy in very unhealthy, unboundaried ways into the addict partner, when he's not able to connect, receive, or even hold space for it. And we don't see this, by the way, just in sexual addiction. This is very common in chemical addiction as well, with families who are working with people.
Absolutely.
And one of the tragic things that we will see happen is, again, he's not ready to change, or he's not fully capable of seeing the need for it. Family members, friends, in this case, the partner, just pours all of their best self into it, right? And they burn themselves out on it. One day he actually gets to that point for whatever reason, and the family or the friend, and again, we've seen this a million times with friends, partners, whatever, the other person says, I'm spent.
Yep. I know
I'm out.
you're finally there. You finally look like you're ready for recovery. You're finally making progress. You're finally owning your stuff and leaning in, and you want to sit with me in my pain. But man, I got to tell you, I got nothing left.
I poured out. You say you're ready to receive the gas from the tank. It already spilled everywhere.
Yeah.
Months ago.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And then why do I bring that up? The reason why is because now we're going to get into the boundary side of this. One of the things that's going to need to happen for this partner, and for this partner's listening to this as you go through this, and for any partner listening, please keep in mind, the concept of, I need to be sharing my authenticity with my partner all the time, guys. That always applies. In an intimate relationship, we need to share our authentic selves with them. To what degree we do that and how much energy we put behind that, though, should be met with requisite effort on the part of the other.
Correct.
Right? Because if we keep overreaching, best case, we develop resentment. Worst case, we do what we just described. We burn out and we're like, that's it, I'm out.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah.
So keep that in mind as we go through this.
Yeah, because whenever Steve and I hear a betrayed partner tell us they're exhausted, they're spent, they're scared, they've tried everything they know, it just doesn't seem to be working, and they just don't know what to do, and you can tell that they're pretty close to just being done. We then always get into a conversation about, tell us about your use of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this a boundaried relationship? Is your love boundaried? Right? This is whenever we hear exhaustion or efforts that just keep being repeated and repeated and the results just aren't coming, we go right to boundaries. Hey everybody, PBSE podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. Mark and I found ourselves in that place. Messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today.
So let's talk about let's talk first about what healthy boundaries are not. And that might seem like a strange place to start, but how do people typically out there in the world try to set what they believe are, quote, boundaries? Let's talk about what healthy boundaries aren't, because we can hear that there's probably some of this going on in this situation.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
first bullet on our list, I think Steve is probably always be the one. Healthy boundaries are not a mechanism to force your partner to change.
No.
Can't be.
And right out the gate, some of you are probably saying, what?
That's
and understandably
exactly what they are.
Because many of us have grown up in households, probably most of us have grown up in households or in cultures where, whether it's in media, whether it's been through our family dynamics or whatever, that's exactly what we've been taught they're supposed to do.
That's right.
Right? This is how you get him to change. This is, you dial up the pressure, you dial up the heat,
I'm putting boundaries. I'm putting boundaries on you, right?
Yeah.
It's always external.
Boundaries, I'm going to put this in Star Trek terminology, which admittedly makes me nerdy. Boundaries are not an offensive weapon. They're not like phasers. Okay? They're not like the guns of a starship. They're the shields. They're a defensive measure. The goal behind boundaries is always to protect the integrity and authenticity of whatever they are set around.
Correct.
Not to facilitate change on another person. Now, sometimes they have that impact.
Hopefully.
But we do not set them or enforce them from that premise.
Oh, no, and that's why the next bullet we have here, healthy boundaries are never a threat.
No.
And boy, that is how I saw them used when I was growing up.
Yep.
I saw the adults around me fling out all sorts of so-called boundaries, but they were always issued, if you don't do blah, 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 this is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And what was the main emphasis behind that? It wasn't that they intended to really hold those boundaries. It was a threat intended to do what? To force change.
Well, and likely the consequences behind it were what? Typically, when we look at consequences, when they're inaccurately set from that place, it's I am going to make you uncomfortable, right? In order to facilitate something that I am looking for.
Correct. Yep.
Boundaries, when they're healthily set, come from the place of I am going to shift and focus on my needs in the absence of your capacity or willingness or both to be able to meet what I am needing.
Yes.
And again, that's not from a place of guilt trip or shaming or you're a bad husband or you're a
Nope.
bad partner.
Nope.
It's from a place of I need to get this from somewhere. Ideally, I would get it in this partnership with you. But if you're not able to provide that, I have to find other mechanisms for doing so.
Correct. Or I'm going to
Right.
be exhausted, right? Because
Correct.
what's another thing healthy boundaries aren't? They're not a method to play detective, to give constant reminders, to repeat yourself endlessly, to hound the other person. Those are not healthy boundaries.
That last one, that remind, repeat, and hound. My gosh, I was expert at all of those. Brittany and I would have these discussions at length about any topic, right? Whether it was addiction or anything else. If she would screw up or found fault, I mean, I love my mom, I love my parents, but I'll be honest, I learned this from my mom. That was kind of her methodology. When you would make a mistake when I was younger, and again, she's very different now, but back then I would make a mistake and it felt like, at least to me, you'd hear about it 7 different times.
Oh my gosh, right? And
You know?
Steve, if we pause right there, and we're talking about this in depth in Dare to Connect right now. What are the wants and needs behind these unhealthy tactics? Steve, why did your mom remind you 7 times?
I think it was from the premise. I mean, I wouldn't want a mind reader, but I know why I do it with Brittany, or used to, I should say, is if I keep repeating this, then she'll somehow hear it on time number 7. In other words, the error here, it has to be with you're just not hearing me,
Right.
and you need to hear me.
You need to hear me. Yeah.
Right.
And part of this, you need to hear me because I do love and care about you.
Yeah,
I do
for
care
sure.
about us. Right. But I'll bet if I chip away at you and chip away at you, it'll eventually get through.
Or if I make you, if I wear you, like you said, wear you down, or I make this experience unpleasant enough for you,
Unpleasant enough for you.
right? Then somehow, my mom literally would say it in the following phrase, and I think I've said this to Brittany. This is like real time with Steve. I didn't remember this till right now. It's kind of like core memory, but the phrase would always be somehow, maybe this time it'll sink in. That was
Maybe
always
this
the
time
phrase.
it'll sink in. And what's the issue with that approach? And again, we understand, especially for betrayed partners, a lot of you feel this is all I got. If I don't use these strategies, Mark and Steve, what do I got? It's the only way he'll listen. It's the only way anything seems to change at all if I go to these places. Let's say that you do somehow get through with these approaches. At best, all you're going to get is compliance.
Yes.
Not a sincere, genuine interchange on his part that will last. You'll just get compliance. And things might be better for a little while. And then doggone it if they don't just all fall to pieces again, given enough time, because it's just compliance. So with all of that as a contrast, what are healthy boundaries? What do those look like?
Well, it definitely is a dramatic shift. And again, we are going to just gloss over this, guys. There's not much time to cover this in a podcast, nor is it possible. If you have not tried out Dare to Connect or you struggle with boundaries, which I would respectfully say there are precious few on this call who don't.
Yes.
Please come to Dare to Connect. We are focused right now on the drama triangle and the wants and needs behind it. We're doing a deep dive into that and blowing people's brains. And next week, probably the week after that,
In a couple of weeks
is when we will shift from all of the dysfunctionality behind the way we try to get these things done and moving towards boundary setting, how they work, why they work, how to do it. And it will blow your mind whole.
We're going to spend at
over.
least a month. We might spend 2 months on boundaries. That's 3 sessions a week right? At
Yeah.
least 12 sessions on boundaries.
And
Because
we don't drag it out when we do it this way in
no,
D2C. This is like the third or fourth time we've gone through it over the years that D2C has been active. Is because it takes that much to really even get just a start in understanding how they're supposed to work.
because we've been taught so many dysfunctional ways about this, right?
The term boundaries probably is
Oh,
the least understood terminology in all of psychology.
it's one of the most bastardized terms that
You hear it constantly. Well, you
I know.
just it's a boundaries issue. You
I
need better
know.
boundaries. And it is shocking how so many, even professionals, do not understand how they're actually supposed to work.
You know, it's so true. It's so true. And let's talk about that for a few minutes. What they are, right?
2 week free trial,
And
daretoconnectnow.com. Get your
yeah,
butt over here.
come over to Dare to Connect because we can only do the surface here today. So healthy boundaries are always based on your authentic wants and needs. It's to build a safety perimeter around your authentic wants and needs, not about that person over there. It's about you. And they're always designed to protect those wants and needs, to protect your genuine, authentic, higher self, right? Your direction in life, the castle you're trying to build, the goals and dreams you're trying to achieve. Healthy boundaries are to draw that around yourself to protect all of what I'm describing. That's what
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. There are, and in order for boundaries to even work, this may sound obvious, but it is amazing how off base we get in these, especially in the heat of the moment. They have to be specific, thought out in advance, and then clearly and calmly communicated.
Clearly and calmly communicated. Yes.
Which again is a tall order. All of
And when we say,
itself.
clearly, specific, clearly, and calmly communicated boundaries, that also means the attendant consequences, outcomes, and results if they are violated.
Yep.
And it's
Absolutely.
hard to clearly and calmly communicate consequences, outcomes, and results because what happens? If you keep doing this, damn it, I'm going to, right? And here comes the consequence, outcome, or result.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the biggest mistakes. That's another big mistake that people make with boundaries is too often we either set or the boundary or try to come up with the consequence either reactively or on the fly.
We do in the heat of the moment when we're frustrated, angry, exhausted, done.
Yep.
That is not the time to come up with a boundary or its attendant consequences.
When I'm at the apex of my anger or my trauma or my shame, I'm going to determine a long-term trajectory and authentic need for myself. Do you guys see how that would be a problem?
Well, because then what happens if you do it then in that mindset, you're not able to follow this last bullet of healthy boundaries, which is they are always held to and followed through with.
Yep.
And if I set them in that moment of anger or exhaustion or frustration or whatever, what are the chances that the boundary I have reacted with and the consequence I've shouted, what are the chances I'm going to actually follow through with that long term?
Yes. It's no secret that my in-laws, while I knew my wife for a long time before we got married, and I remember my wife's younger brother, he had some behavioral issues, and it was interesting when I was dating Brittany, watching from the sidelines how dysfunctional they were trying their best, but they did not have the tools. They had a lot of other issues that I've described on the program before. How dysfunctionally they would come together when it comes to exactly what Mark is talking about right now. When my father-in-law was and possibly still could be famous for, if he caught, I remember one time they caught their son doing something. I can't remember what it was, like stealing money out of mom's purse. He grounded him right on the spot for 6 months. Now that sounds really great, and it came from an anger place, and to be fair, it probably also came from an element as much as he functionally could, which is limited. Of you need to know how bad this is so that you don't do this again.
True.
How sustainable is that? You really going to ground a kid for 6 months?
6 straight months.
How are you going to facilitate that? And here's what would happen: he would overcompensate in part because why? His wife, my mother-in-law, was completely enabling. And she would secretly let him off the punishment. And I remember that time he wasn't grounded more than 3 days.
3 days. Yeah.
And I saw that pattern repeat all the time. Can you imagine the confusion for that kid?
Oh my gosh, the confusion, the lack of actually using healthy boundaries to help him learn self-management. and the complete and utter loss of credibility that he had for his
Exactly.
own.
That's a perfect way to describe
Oh
it,
my
right? When we
gosh.
try to set boundaries and they're not realistic or we don't follow through with them, what do? We undercut. I loved your term. We undercut our own credibility.
We do. We
Because
do.
for him, he learned really quick what? These people are full of shit. I'm not going to.
I'm going to play them. I know how to push their buttons and get
Exactly. This
what I
is
want.
nonsense. This isn't going to work.
And what do we and I
Right?
want to be very careful with this next part because it's so legitimate and it's so understandable that you would absolutely declare this boundary and consequence. Betrayed partners will scream out, if you do that one more time, I'm divorcing you
Yeah.
in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to that situation, they realize, oh crap, what did I declare? Am I really ready for actual divorce? We have kids involved. We have finances. We have a home. Why did I say that?
Now, if you're really at that point, then obviously that's what, but those are the kinds of things that we have in non-escalated dialogue, deliberate conversations.
Yeah.
Not in the moment when we're operating from a place of fight, flight, or freeze. From the addict, from the partner, or from the addict, because
Correct.
addicts do the same bloody thing.
It's even worse.
How many times did with Brittany was I like, that's it, this is just too damn hard, that's it, we're done, we're over, and I'd start packing a bag. I
Right.
did that too many times to admit.
And as we've been talking, if you were in D2C right now with the drama triangle, what you would do is Steve was playing victim in order to trigger his wife's rescuer role tendency.
You want to hear some drama triangle incarnate examples? Get your butt over to D2C because we got some real zingers.
Yeah, we're raw and real
processing
right now about how we play those roles.
Yes.
Now, as I read this partner submission, I thought to myself, well, what happens if you do have a partner that simply refuses to abide by boundaries or is regularly inconsistent or responds initially, but then goes back to the same old later, right? What do you do then? Because we hear this a lot. Well, Mark and Steve, I think I've been maybe okay at boundaries. I have had concept, but it doesn't seem to be doing any good. What am I supposed to do about that?
Yeah. Well, and there could be a lot of things going on there, right? Because the question, the dilemma here is if he's just, he's regularly, or as sometimes we say, he's being consistently inconsistent, right? He won't stick to things. He won't follow through with things. He sometimes is outright refuses, right?
Or forgets, or just seems to go on autopilot, and things are okay, good for a little bit, and then it's right back to the old stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and so some things to consider. Some are obvious, some are not. Before we get to the harder part of this, as we wrap things up in this podcast, a couple of things could be going on. One, the other person may not be in a state of change that is sufficient to actually shift in their thinking. And this describes many addicts to a T. This describes me and Mark for years.
Yep.
We knew deep down we needed to change, at least on some level. We were probably terribly naive as to what needed to change, but it wasn't like, I mean, speaking for myself, on year 5 of this rigmarole roller coaster with my partner, it's not like I was walking away thinking just like, gosh, maybe I just had a light bulb. Maybe this is destructive. Like clearly there was a problem, right?
Yeah, we knew.
But I also wasn't ready to take steps to really get serious about it either, right?
Well, or things I was trying were wholly inadequate to the magnitude of the problem or the issue.
Yeah.
And there was an unwillingness to really go deep and to get serious at times, putting in lip service, we call it, or the place I was trying really hard, but we're talking 30 plus years of addiction for me.
Yeah.
This wasn't going to happen overnight.
Well, and oftentimes, and this kind of takes us back to the beginning, sometimes there is a legitimate disconnect for an addict in what is in the link between their actions, how that actually affects the partner, how it affects the relationship.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be an error on many people's part, including the partners. That was definitely the case for Brittany and I. She tried to love me into change. And that oftentimes from an understandable and a very admirable but misguided place, she shielded me from consequences far too often.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I found at times I was operating from a place of pride. I was being obstinate, resistant. I wanted to save face, or I had to be right. I could not be wrong.
Can't be wrong in one more way.
Self-esteem was so horrifically shattered. Couldn't take one more hit to being, to not being right. And like you said, Steve, the addict may not be, this partner seemed to indicate, I don't think he's understanding the magnitude of what his actions have done, the impact on our relationship, on me personally. He's tuning into my feelings and trying to help me like process those for myself. But what about the elephant in the room? What this is all about and what it's done.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Mark, because I was going to add something to that. And we don't know this partner or this addict from Adam. We're just going off of our own experience. But I would say that there's a very good chance that this partner herself doesn't even understand fully how this has impacted her or the relationship.
That could be.
That could be on both sides. And if you're talking about a first step for this couple, they already have some good people. They got a trauma therapist and a CSAT in place. Definitely, this looks like this couple ought to be heading towards a formal disclosure, which would include her working with someone qualified to do her part of that, which is writing out a full impact statement, or even breaking that down into multiple sub-impact statements.
Yes.
And really exploring, if we're going to go through and do a formal disclosure, it's not just about him disclosing all the crap from the past. It's about him coming to terms with and truly seeing the full scope of what has been going on here, both in terms of his behavior, but the impact on her and their coupleship.
Yeah, she could have a lot of work, understandably, to even understand the impact it's had on her, right? Because betrayed partners try to hold things together. They're trying to survive. They try to stay optimistic. They try to, well, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe he will change. They try to do damage control the best they can.
Yep.
And often the full impact is sidestepped. For both the addict and the partner. And Steve, you and I had as the final bullet here, and we know that this is never something that relationships want to hear. After all of this, you may be looking at an issue of compatibility.
Yeah,
Are we compatible? If what really matters to me at my deepest core level, with my value system, with my goals, my dreams, what is authentic to me. Are you on a page with your authenticity where those things that really matter to me, can they matter to you? Can we get on the same page and be on the same team? And we might discover through this whole process that we can't.
Yeah.
That's painful.
Absolutely. Well, and those are hard questions. Those are scary questions, right? But we're glad that this couple has that kind of backing, that kind of information. And as always, guys, we love having you here. There's so much more to say about this, but we scratched the surface a bit. If you like what you're hearing here, you'll love to see. Come on over, daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to have you join us. The discussions right now are livelier and more engaged than they've ever been. We had a couple the other day, one of the partners in a session on Wednesday in our partner session, Mark and I were talking about one element of this boundary stuff, and they just put, I don't even know how to make it, but the little emoji where the brain explodes, and it just said mind blown.
Exploding brain, yeah.
Yeah, and we love that they put that in there. They're, again, these things are hard to understand. They're hard to grapple with, especially when you're in the thick of it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just come over and use ours. We've already done it. Yeah. We'd love to have you come join us. We'd love to have you come join the program, and if you like it, and you're here for a time, we are doing a D2C couples retreat in 2026, and being a member of Dare to Connect for at least several months gives you the potential to access that, where you can go with Mark and I and experience things in an even more in-depth level. So if you're interested in any of those things, you can check out the information on all of that and more at daretoconnectnow.com.
Yeah. Thanks for being here once again. We love all of you all across the world, and we will definitely pick things up on our next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Be well. We'll see you then.
All right. See ya.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants, and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.